Alrighty, guys. Here's our presenter for the evening. I will go on mute.
How are y'all? My name is Kia Smith. I am based in Atlanta, and a little bit about me. So by day, I work as digital director for a faith-based advocacy organization. Basically, I get people to align their faith values with progressive values and vote and work on policy changes. So I do a whole lot of digital and website stuff. Outside of that, I'm a writer, cultural commentator, and public theologian. So I'm in seminary, and what I do is I talk a lot to people about faith and culture and how they intersect with justice. And as a Black woman, a lot of that is centered around Black womanhood. So as I'm talking about Black womanhood today and going through this presentation, looking at figures from the past and contemporary figures, I really want to ground it in the fact that it is based, the people who I chose today are the people who are influencing me and the work that I do in the writing, the speaking, and to really get people thinking about where we are as a culture and how we can be better to be more progressive and more embracing, inclusive of all people. Any questions for me before I hop into the chat? Or I'm sorry, the presentation.
I will make sure to monitor the chat for us.
Okay.
We don't have anything just yet.
And I want to go to share this. I'm sorry, y'all. I have to change my system's settings to share really quickly. My apologies.
Yes. While we're waiting, Bree, can we get the correct spelling of the first African American woman that was inducted into the WNBA, please? Alrighty, Miss Kia, we still have nothing in the chat, so we are ready to go.
Alrighty. So I am talking about this as the woman who raised it, the women who raised us. And it's really about looking at the people who influence us today, from past and contemporary women. And I want to invite you all to jump in this conversation up front. So I would love if you don't have to take your screens off. I completely understand. I'm on Zoom all day and my screen is off most of the time. But I would like for you to come off mute, tell me your name, and like one phrase, one adjective, adverb that would define Black womanhood to you, and a Black woman who really inspires you, and just like you either enjoy seeing them move in the world, or it's someone who you would like to be with. And just tell me a little bit about that. And it can be a celebrity, it can be someone from history, it can be someone from your family. But I would love to know your name, the Black woman who inspires you, and one characteristic of what you think it means to be a Black woman. Who wants to go first?
I am.
So I'll go. Hi, everyone. It's Amber. I hope everyone is having a good evening. So a word to describe Black women to me is powerful. And a Black woman who inspires me is Jane Boleyn. I have an interest in law, and she is the first African-American woman to serve as a judge in the United States.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber.
Hi, my name is Bree, and a woman who inspires me is definitely my aunt, Karen. She's also my godmother or my nanny. She is an African American woman. She served in the Army, and she is the head of the Department of Defense. And one word that describes Black women for me is resilient.
Awesome. Thank you, Bree.
I'll go. Hi, everyone. My name is Lakia Brown. One word to describe Black women, I would say strong, but Amber said powerful, so they're kind of the same. So I'll just say unique, very unique. A Black woman that I admire, I have so many, but I'm gonna be local, Tallahassee. Sika Green, she is a very powerful, predominant, just well-rounded woman. She's very successful, owns many businesses, great at fundraising and helping others in the community. So that's one woman I look up to.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you need any more volunteers?
Can we get one more?
Cool. I'll go. One word that I use to describe Black women is unpredictable. I'd say unpredictable because we're usually, it's hard to expect our next move. It's easy to understand what a woman in general may do out of emotions, but a Black woman is so undefined. So I'm going to go with that. Someone who I look up to, I'm definitely going to go with my mom. She embodies strength wholeheartedly. She's a hierarchy in my life, so that's her power.
Thank y'all for sharing. I appreciate that. And I hope that as we're going through this presentation, you see characteristics of Black womanhood in these women. And you also see a diversity of what it means to be a Black woman. So one of the people who really centers my thinking about Black womanhood is Alice Walker. And Alice Walker is an internationally celebrated writer, poet, and activist. You probably know her as the author of The Color Purple. The book won a National Book Award, and she also won a Pulitzer Prize for it. It was turned into a movie in the 80s, and it was a really big deal because it was the first time that we saw a certain type of Black womanhood on film at such a high level. And we saw this Black woman who was poor. So we saw the intersection of race, class, and gender at work, telling these stories that weren't popular at the time. And that was all Alice Walker's doing. During that time, she coined the definition of womanness. Do any of you know anything about womanism, or have you heard the word womanness? You can just like do a reaction raising your hand, or drop it in the chat. Either is fine. So the general definition of womanist is a Black feminist or a feminist of color. But Alice Walker in 1983, she expounded on this definition. And I really want to spend some time here because it allows us to see how diverse Black womanhood really is. Because I think a lot of times we get laser focused on one part of it, but it's so many different things that we should be owning and celebrating. The first part of her definition, it's from womanish. And if you're from the South, you probably heard like people call little girls womanish, or they want to be grown. It's the opposite of girly or frivolous, irresponsible, or not serious. It's really about it's from a Black folk expression that mothers say to their female children: you're acting womanish, you're acting grown. It's usually referring to something outrageous, audacious, courageous, or willful behavior. Like Black women, we're willful, and courageous. Like we don't shrink ourselves in situations. Wanting to know more and in greater depth, asking the questions, and considered good for it all. Interested in doing grown-up things, acting grown-up, being grown-up. It's interchangeable with another Black folk expression: you're trying to be grown. You're responsible, you're in charge, you're serious. And I think a lot of that came out based on the Black women who you all were describing. The second part is it is a woman who loves other women, sexually or non-sexually. So here she's getting into the intersection and saying that it's Black womanhood embraces all women, despite their sexual identification, sexual orientation. It appreciates and prefers women's culture. We like each other when you're a womanist. Women's emotional flexibility, they value tears and laughter and women's strength. Sometimes they love men individually, and but they are committed to the survival and wholeness of an entire people. So like we love women culture, we support women and each other, but we want our entire culture to survive and be well. We're not separatists, that goes back to community, and except for when it's healthy. So to take yourself away for self-care and to make sure you're taking care of you. A universalist, and the example that she provided for this is, Mama, why are we brown, pink, and yellow, and our cousins are white, beige, and black? And the answer is, well, you know, the colored race is just like a flower garden with every flower represented. Traditionally capable. Like if a Black woman says, Mama, I'm walking to Canada and I'm taking you and a bunch of other slaves with me, we are supporting that. And we're going to say it wouldn't be the first time. The third part is one of my favorite parts because it gets to the Black joy. We talk a lot about strength and power, but it's also the joy and just loving life, love music, loves to dance, loves the moon, loves the spirit, loves love, food, and roundness, loves struggle, loves the folk. The folk is the community, the people who we are living with and helping out, loves herself regardless. Self-love is so important as we start to think about what Black womanhood is. And the last thing she says is, womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. That's important because a lot during the time when this came out, there was the feminist movement, and a lot of that was based in white feminism. And what she says when she means feminist as womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender is, womanism is deeper, it's richer, it's a darker hue. So there is more depth to it than what you were finding in traditional feminism at that time. Any questions? Awesome. Okay. So the other thing that I want to point out is womanism is intersectional. It acknowledges the whole of who a person is. So we're talking race, gender, class, sexuality, and all other forms of identity. And womanism emerged at a time, like I talked about feminism. So the purpose were, so you have white women who are organizing for their needs, but their needs are very much middle class, and they're very much focused on what middle class white women need at the time. And then you have the Black liberation movement that came out of the 60s and 70s, and that was very much focused on the needs of Black men. So you have Black women here who are active in both of these movements, but also alienated because it's not meeting their needs. So womanism emerged to counter the classism and racism that was happening in the feminist movement and the sexism that was happening in the Black liberation movement. And that is one of the reasons it's so important that womanism includes as many people as possible and is not leaving others out. So the first or the second woman I want to talk to you about is Kimberly Crenshaw. She's a lawyer and civil rights activist. She's a philosopher and the leading scholar on critical race theory. There has been a lot of talk about critical race theory now because it's having an influence on how we see policy and we do education. And a lot of conservatives are pushing back on it, and they don't want to have critical race talk because it's changing the way we deal with Black and brown folks in reality. And I think this is very important for how we start. I think one thing that I really want to do in this presentation is to allow you to see how the work of these people lives on today. And I am going to click here. Let me do a quick time check. I want you to view, you can't see this because I didn't share my screen right. Hold on and give me 1 second and I'm gonna stop and reshare. I apologize about that, but we will get it here. Share. All right, so what this is it's going to be like the first 2 minutes of Kimberly Crenshaw's TED Talk, and it really outlines why she came up with this definition of intersectionality. Can you all see this screen, first of all?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. And if you could go through the exercise just for yourself, I would love for you just to see how many of these names you are recognizing.
I'd like to try something new. Those of you who are able, please stand up. Okay, so I'm going to name some names. When you hear a name that you don't recognize, you can't tell me anything about them, I'd like you to take a seat and stay seated. The last person standing will see what they know. Okay? All right. Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Mia Rice, Freddie Gray. For those of you who are still standing, I'd like you to turn around and take a look. I'd say half to most of the people are still standing. So let's continue.
I'm done. Stop.
Tanisha Anderson. Ara Russer. Megan Hockaday. So if we look around again, there are about 4 people still standing. And actually, I'm not going to put you on the spot. I just say that to encourage transparency, so you can be seated. So those of you who recognize the first group of names know that these were African Americans who've been killed by the police over the last 2.5 years. What you may not know is that the other list is also African Americans who have been killed within the last 2 years. Only one thing distinguishes the names that you know from the names that you don't know: gender. So let me first let you know that there's nothing at all distinct about this audience that explains the pattern of recognition that we've just seen. I've done this.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there and jump back into our presentation. But what Kimberly Crenshaw created this theory, this understanding of intersectionality. And she created it because at the time, when we think about women, we're normalized to think about white women. When we think about Black people, we think about men. And what this does is it creates a hole that Black women are left out. So Kimberly Crenshaw challenged this and wanted us to start thinking about people's specific identity points, so that as the media is talking about Black people who are murdered by police, they're not omitting all of these women, and they are in the public conscious as well. So that is the understanding of intersectionality that pops up in Alice Walker's work, and that is really fundamental to the work that Kimberly Crenshaw does. Any questions about that so far? All right. One thing that I think about often with Black womanhood is our bodies. Our bodies are often so like they are hypersexualized. They are always under a microscope. People are looking, they're telling us that we have to dress a certain way to cover up because of our natural shape and everything. And one of the people who I learned about in college that really like started me to really think about the Black female body was Sarah Bartman. She was believed to be born in South Africa's Eastern Cape in 1789. Her mother died when she was 2, and her father died when she was a teenager. It shouldn't say teen. I'm sorry, that is my typo fault. She was an adolescent when her father died. So you have this young girl who is left with no parents, no covering. And in 1810, although she was illiterate, she allegedly signed a contract to take place in shows. So what you have is you have Sarah Bartman, who is now traveling throughout Europe, participating in what was considered freak shows, and she has people who are like fascinated about her body. And one thing that a BCB article pointed out at the time was that it's a quote that says, "You have to remember that at the time it was highly fashionable and desirable for women to have large bottoms. So lots of people envied what she had naturally without having to accentuate her figure." So what I think about when I think about this, like from a historical to contemporary aspect, is how what we see on Instagram a lot, where we see people who are having surgery to replicate what Black women's bodies look like. And the problem with this is like she was dehumanized in the process. When she died, they made a mold of her body. They put her brain and her skeleton on display, and her body was on display, on public display, up until 1974, when there was finally outrage around it, and they removed her from the museum exhibit. So you have this woman who was never able to fully live her life, and it was all centered around the dehumanization of her body and the othering of her natural and physical form. Kelly Brown Douglas is another, I included her here because when I think about Black women's bodies, she pops up. She's an Episcopal priest, a womanist theologian, and she is a dean and professor at Union Theological Seminary. And she has a book called Sexuality in the Black Church that talks about the images of Black people in the media. It talks about how the Black body has been treated throughout history, and how that has caused us to have such understanding around like how it has caused us to automatically sexualize Black women's body when it's not necessary. She also has a great book around Stand Your Ground and Black people who have been murdered by police and victims of white supremacist violence. Ida B. Wells Barnett. She is a journalist, activist, and a researcher in the late 19th and early 20th century. Personally, I love Ida B. Wells Barnett because she hyphenated her name. She didn't just take her husband's name, she hyphenated long before it was popular. So long before like womanism and feminism was a thing, or long before womanism was a thing, she was putting those principles into practice. And she was a journalist who told the stories of lynching throughout the South. So she traveled the world to bring attention to Black people who were being killed in the streets in the South. She was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi on July 16th, 1862. She was born into slavery during the Civil War. And once the war ended, her parents' home became politically active during the Reconstruction era politics. She went to Russ College, but was expelled when she started a dispute with the university president. So she's always pushing back, courageous. When disease took both of her parents and her infant brother, she was left to raise her other brothers and sisters. And she took a job as a teacher to keep the family together. And she eventually moved her siblings to Memphis, Tennessee, where she remained and where she worked as an educator. In 1884, Wells Barnett filed a lawsuit against a train car company in Memphis for unfair treatment. And she had been thrown off a first class train despite having a ticket. She won the case locally, and the ruling was eventually overturned in federal court. In 1893, she joined other African American leaders in calling for the boycott of the World's Columbian Exposition. And the boycotters accused the exposition committee of locking out African Americans and negatively portraying the Black community. And in 1895, she married, that's when she married Ferdinand Barnett, and they had 4 kids together. So she also, throughout her life, balanced motherhood and her activism. She traveled internationally, shedding the light on lynching to foreign audiences. She openly confronted white women in the suffrage movement who ignored lynching. And this is again highlighting how white feminism during the late 19th century and early 20th century really focused on the needs of white women and not that of Black women, the need of womanism. And because of her stance, she was often ridiculed and ostracized by women's suffrage organizations in the US. Nevertheless, she remained active in the women's rights movement, and she was the founder of the National Association of Colored Women's Club that addressed issues dealing with civil rights and women's suffrage. And Ida B. Wells' work, out of that, I think about the founders of Black Lives Matter. And what I am going to do is I'm going to click through to a video that you probably can't see. So give me a second while I redo the screen sharing. And I am going to let them tell their story in this video after this quick ad.
Game where grandson and granddad will bond. This is the
What prompted Black Lives Matter was really around the murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012. I wrote a Facebook post, Black people, I love you, I love us, our lives matter, Black Lives Matter. Patrice put a hashtag in front of it, and I didn't know what a hashtag was. And Opal said, this is brilliant, and I think we should build something that connects people online and get people to do stuff together offline.
Alicia, Opal, and I created a container for Black protest to be seen and taken seriously. And then just like dandelions, folks bloomed out of that. So we can't take sole responsibility for 3,000 protests around the globe, because that's people listening and responding and saying, okay, we hear the words Black Lives Matter, we're gonna prove it, we're gonna take it to the streets.
There are children who are coming of age in a generation where they see themselves as being affirmed and valued. We deserve to live in a multiracial democracy that works for all of us. And so this is not in vain. Keep on.
Alrighty. Oops. And give me a second, let me turn this off. And what I really wanted you all to get from this is to understand the diversity of Black womanhood, how we are strong, but we also love fun and just life and community, how we care for self and we care for each other, and how our stories from the past, how the stories of the past intersect with the work that is happening now. And finally, to really understand the theories that are grounding these discussions about Black womanhood. Are there any questions that I can answer for you all?
I don't see anything in the chat just yet.
Okay. As I was discussing this, were there any women who came to mind who you know, again, famous or local or family, who are doing similar work, who share characteristics with the women I discussed?
I'm thinking I can't. I have a block and I know main space. I know she's thinking that she's blocked too. Oh, okay. We have Miss Kia Smith. We have Miss Quay. We're honored.
Right?
There are some really phenomenal women. Trayvon Martin's mother. She actually went in the office behind, his circumstance.
And that comes to mind when I think about resilience. Like, life deals us a lot of hard blows, and way too often we use that as our inspiration, or we see that as a point, as a place that needs change, and we push forward. You saw that with Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams ran for governor of Georgia. She lost the election because her competition was cheating. And she went to work to make sure that Black people had access to the polls. And not only did she turn Georgia blue, win the White House, but she also won the Senate so that we can actually get some policy work done. So that is another really great characteristic of Black women. Like, we take our lemons and we turn them into lemonade.
I have a quick question. Who's the woman in Louisville? Is that St. Louis, Missouri, where she's now, I don't know if she's a senator, she's a part, but she's a part of the local government.
Cori Bush?
I think so.
Yes, Cori Bush, she's a state rep. She is awesome. If y'all are on Twitter, and I'm sure she's on Instagram, y'all are younger than me, y'all like Instagram. But she is awesome about really advocating for her community. She advocates for her community, which is a Black community, in a way that you don't see a lot of elected issues. Like, she's unapologetic about it, and she was only elected in November, so she's only been there a month or so, but she has been a great voice for her community and really making sure that Black people are centered in policy issues that are coming up in Congress.
I'm pulling her up so that I can just add her name in the chat. We also had a Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama is another great example. She has a great documentary on Netflix that really gets into her life. And I'm trying to think of how I would describe Michelle. Michelle is really, when I think of Michelle, I think of like grace in class in a way that I personally don't have. Her whole, like, you go high when they go low, like, that's not in my DNA, but I respect it. Like, someone has to do that. So she is like, she's strong. She exhibits grace in class, and she also has shown us what it's like what Black motherhood looks like under pressure. Like, she raised these girls in the public spotlight while under criticism. Her family was under criticism from the public eye. And even the glimpses that we get of Sasha and Malia, they seem like they have turned out to be dynamic, independent thinkers. And I think that's what we all want for, as parents, that's what we want for our kids. I love how Michelle Obama shows you that she can make it out the hood. Yes. Yes. and she's very authentic and honest about telling the stories of how where she came from and how that has grounded her and how that's part of her a foundational part of who she is. Anyone else?
I have one more to add.
Okay.
Cheating. I'm going on our Instagram because we do a theme, She of the Week.
Uh-huh.
And Centoya Brown.
Oh, that is a good one. Why did you add her? I would love to know.
She has a beautiful testimony. And she just exemplifies, like, her life literally became better when she allowed that test to be her testimony. She's able to promote herself, her strength. She's able to connect to an audience that's usually silenced. She shows you what it looks like to wear your scars with pride. So
and another thing I love about her story is way too often we don't allow Black women to be victims. We don't extend the grace to Black women for even like mistakes they've made. Not saying that anything she did was a mistake, because she was clearly a child and victimized, but we don't extend grace to Black women and empathy in those situations. And that is what led to her being convicted. And I think as we are talking about building community and like what our circles look like, it's really important that we understand that Black women deserve grace, we deserve empathy, we are victims, and we should be treated as such.
I see Maine, she raised her hand. Did you want to talk? No? Okay, never mind.
You said Maine?
Yeah. Yeah. Did you or no? No? Okay. That was it.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that I was able to share some things with you.
Oh, okay, cool. So that was educational. I have some stuff down here that I took notes on. You definitely talked about women that I didn't have in mind. So on behalf of our organization, I would definitely love to say thank you. Um, She Academy has a giveaway. Something that we wanted to do. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. Miss Bree, she said, "Thank you so much, Miss Smith."
Thank you.